Welcome to today's session. Today's topic is designing learning for high on job transfers of skills. With us, we have a panelist of three: Rachel Gatogo, Paul Njogona, and Renz Baya. Um, yes, sorry, I'm getting something on the screen that I'd like to share with you as part of the introduction. These are a little bit of a housekeeping rules as we start our session. This is to guide those who are new either to our Zoom sessions. You'll see that we have tried to direct our viewers, our session learners who are joining us here today towards how to use the Zoom. The arrows, you can chat us or ask us questions through the chat. Kindly turn off your videos and check. You can check to test whether your audio is okay. If it's not okay, type. If it's okay, type a yes. If it's not okay, type a no. Yes. If it's okay, type chat a yes. If it's not okay, chat a no. Well, our first panelist will be Rachel Gadagu, sorry. She's Rachel Gadagu is she's a learning and development specialist and knowledge management enthusiast. She's also a life and career coach. Her expertise are learning and instruction design, which is including the e-learning, organization, learning, development learning strategy, learning marketing, learning analytics. Rachel works with companies and organizations to provide thought leadership on learning and development matters. So she can also provide. We are having some issues over here, so just hold on. Just a minute, just a minute. Thank you. Now, sorry about that. I wish to reintroduce Rachel Gatagu. Rachel is a learning and development specialist. She's also She's also a knowledge management enthusiast, a life and career coach expertise, learning and instruction design, including e-learning, organization learning, developing learning strategies, learning marketing, and learning analytics. Rachel works with companies and organizations to provide thought leadership on learning and development matters. She also provides technical support on tools and software needed to improve e-learning in the organization. Rachel has over 10 years experience in the development sector. And that's our first panelist for today. Welcome, Rachel, to our session.
Thank you, Rachel.
Our next specialist is Lens. Thanks. I don't know whether I get your pronunciation from you, how you pronounce your names.
You got it right. Thank you.
Welcome. Lens currently works as an instructional designer within financial crime industry. He's in developing certification programs primarily for compliance professionals. Lens has served in numerous projects as an instructional design consultant in a wide variety of industries. He started his career as a secondary education teacher in the United States of America. Lenz holds a certificate in instructional technology from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and an undergraduate degree in psychology and philosophy from the University of, I'm blessed. Sorry. He's also a passionate advocate of the instructional design profession to improve organizational performance and workplace learning. as a multi-faith and multilingual designer, as a multilingual designer with a 5-year experience. His interest lies in advancing and professional thoughts out of the Caribbean and the African continent. Lens, welcome to our session today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our last and not the least panelist will be Paul Jogona. He's a senior instruction designer. He's got a master degree in instruction design from USA, bachelor degree graphic from USA, associate degree in fine arts from Buruburu Institute of Fine Arts, BIFA. He believes instruction design is not about pretty pictures and text placed together in a way that creates a presentation. Rather, it is a discipline of carefully plotted instructional methodology balanced against design elements that harmoniously flow to form an equivocally, beautifully immersive and outstanding experience. He believes this is what sets him apart from the pack. He's got over 17 years in experience. Paul will be joining us later as we continue the session. Paul,
Oh,
you're
can you
already in
guys
the
hear me?
session. Oh, sorry
Yeah, I'm
about
here.
that, Paul. How are you?
I'm here.
Oh, sorry. Welcome. And thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us. I'll be heading over to Martin, our facilitator of the day, to take over.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Paul, Rachel, Lenz. Good afternoon, guys. And to our audience, welcome very much. See, we have people from Tanzania, see Uganda, Kenya, Swaziland. Anyone from Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, South Africa? Okay, so to start our session right now, so we're still continuing with our June session of e-learning, and today we look at learning, designing learning for high on-the-job transfer of skills. To set us off, I'd like to launch a few polls just to, to, to get a feeling in the room. So you'll see a number of a question there in the poll. As far as learning in my organization, I am. So either attend trainings when I'm asked to attend. I decide which trainings employees attend and which trainings we purchase. Trainings, that's a foreign thing in my company. Okay, let's take on the votes and just see who we have in the room. Okay, we'll just close at 1 minute, at the 1 minute mark. Okay, so far we have about 29 people out of the 46 in the session who have taken this poll. And we have about 10 seconds before we close this. Okay, at least we have over 50%. So just to share the results of this, we have a fair mix of people who attend trainings and then those who decide on what is being bought. Luckily, we are seeing everybody is doing trainings in the organization. Then just a quick another poll. We might have a few polls just to set the tone. So we want to see what are you guys using in the organizations. So my organization has adopted virtual learning in the following areas: virtual instructor-led trainings, self-paced learning, both 1 and 2. Our organization is still thinking around e-learning. So Paul, Rachel, and Lens, I'm just hoping you'll be able to have a grasp of the people in this session and who is represented in this session before we kick this off. Okay, 10 more seconds of voting and then we close. Okay, want to close this and then share the results. So we still have organizations that are still thinking around the e-learning. Well, I think it's something, and we're seeing a combination of both virtual instructor-led and self-paced. Okay, thank you very much. Maybe we can do one last question before, so that we can. This is a series of questions just to get a few things going. So we have, which statement applies to your organization as far as learning is concerned? We regularly send our employees to public open courses. We create our learning solutions internally. And the second one is we collect feedback from managers on what learning their teams require to with specific skills required to be developed. I have a KPI on a number of trainings employees attend per year. I just need to meet my target. We normally have a plan of which capabilities each employee needs in the year, and the employee only attends those trainings that meet his needs. So we are selecting what sounds like the organization. Nobody has taken a vote so far. I think people are still trying to figure out. Okay, then the third one was, in my organization, half of the trainings work. We just don't know which half. We can link any performance improvements to trainings. We can't link any performance improvement to trainings. Trainings are feel good. We send employees to hope they learn something and hope they come to teach others in the organization. We can, with learning analytics, justify each shilling we spend on learning. So we only have 10 people who have voted out of the 49. I'd like to encourage you to just take a vote so that we can have a look at how things are on the ground. Paul and Lenz and Rachel, I think this is one of the key interesting areas which I think I'll invite I think everybody on the panel to just have a go at this, to think what it means. Okay, we still have 20 people, 10 more seconds, and if we can get at least 10 more people vote, that would be great. 8 more out of the 10 I'm looking for. If you haven't voted, just take a vote, and then let's see how things are. Five more, and 5 more seconds, and then we can close this. Okay, let me end this poll and then share this result. Paul, you're with us? Paul, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
On any of this, what we've just gotten, what's your thinking around it? What does it tell? Is there anything you can read?
Yeah, I'm just analyzing this to kind of give you a good answer here.
Okay. Or Rachel being familiar with this market as Paul analyzes? Rachel, what's your thoughts?
All right. So from the first questions, we see 70% saying they develop their trainings internally, their learning solutions. So showing a lot of organizations depending with internal content in terms of maybe working with subject matter experts to develop their own content. Again, it will be interesting to see if that content speaks to the learning needs of the organizations or the learners, because I would expect if we are developing internal content or our training internally, to be from what you've seen as a need, as a skills gap from our staff. And the second one, you have 56% saying they collect feedback from managers on what the learning teams require. So again, speaking to question one, so if they're already getting the skills required, the learning from learning assessments, then that's why they develop the learning internally. And then when we go to number 3, again, interesting here, there's a big shift because 44% says they can't link any performance improvement to trainings. Our trainings are a feel good. We send employees and hope they learn something. So, so this is, again, the answer here conflicts with question 1 and question 2, because if we are developing internal learning and we are getting this learning needs or assessments from the managers, how come we are not linking them again to performance, or if they are not changing the any improvement? There's no improvement from what the learners learn about. So again, interesting to see what happens. Where is that shift from the assessments we get, and also when we come to linking to improvement, that doesn't happen, showing that there's a gap when it comes to designing the courses or designing the trainings that we are required to meeting the objectives. So maybe the trainings don't meet the objectives of the learners themselves, or who is this that measures this improvement? Because if the manager is the one who's measuring the improvement in terms of performance, that comes from the learning, then there's definitely something wrong there. Because if I'm a manager and someone asks me, or the learning and development units ask me for learning needs, definitely they should be able to speak to the outcome or the goals, should be able to speak to the performance. But would be interesting to hear what Paul and Len says about it.
So, Len, just to you, then Paul will come to you. This number 3, half of the trainings work, we just don't know which half. Interesting case scenario there. What's your thinking there?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, and thank you everybody for having me join today. Glad everybody could join and participate. So Martin, when I see that half the trainings work, we just don't know which half, what pops into mind for me is analytics. Analytics has become a big term in the learning field nowadays because we're expected as training centers to demonstrate ROI, the return on investment. So at some point down the line, there's going to be some manager, some member of senior leadership who's going to be wondering, is training really getting us our return on investment? And so this is not the answer, all right, that you want to give to your senior leadership. So it's going to be very, very important as a learning professional or somebody who's in the HR space and talent development to really start to determine what are the metrics that the training is actually tackling and how is it connected to the business objectives, so that if the senior leadership does ask those questions, and we know that those questions are usually asked around budget time, right? Around the fiscal year, when they're trying to decide who's staying, who's going, how the organization is going to move forward. You want to be able to say that, yes, the learning and development department, here's the training that we've developed, here's who's taken the training, and here's how it's improved their performance. So that's what comes to mind for me for that particular question.
Paul, so I want to just this on the statement which applies to organization as far as learning. We're seeing quite a huge number.
Yeah.
70% is creating the learning solutions internally, right?
Which, I want to say thank you so much for having me join you guys in this session. Now, I think this is a really good number here, because when I see, you guys are doing 70% rather of your training internally, that means it's customized to the end user. When you buy off-the-shelf training, it's already, it's more like a templatized kind of a version rather. But, when you have something which is built from the ground up, you identify with what those pain points that these learners are going through. And so that kind of brings me back to methodology. How do we build this training? Who comes to you and says you need training? Is it the manager? Is it some higher up in that executive kind of a level right there? Who is the driver for that training? And the next question which I ask you is, what kind of methodology do you use to develop this training? Do they just say, hey, do this training, build it out using, say, articulate RISE, and then you just run with that idea? Or do you just pause and question and ask them, hey, what kind of goal are you focused towards? What have you measured that tells you have a problem? What do people need to do on the job? Why aren't they doing it? And then sometimes, you need to enter into that kind of mentality where you you delineate and kind of show them, okay, this is a training solution problem here. We have a non-training kind of a solution to this problem. So you should be able to wear that consultancy hat and just, lead and inspire and influence people with methodology as your bedrock, and then show them, yeah, this is the best way we can solve your problem. Please, I think for me, I always tell the clients, at the end of the day, please just note that training is not the solution to everything. Sometimes you have those non-training solutions, which you as an instructional designer are expected to educate them and tell them, yeah, you know what, maybe you just need a simple infographic. Maybe you need a simple and nimbler solution to that problem. So it's, the way I see this, it's always about performance consultancy as your first measure before you even start building the training. After all those pieces in that consultancy have been figured out, then you can recommend the best solution for them and then move forward. But that's my take on how I develop training. We can get into a different discussion as far as methodologies are concerned, but I think that's a good place for me to pause and see what questions you have.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So, Lens, to you, I think maybe you can help by who or what is an instructional designer? What's their role in learning?
Sure, sure. So an instructional designer is somebody who is in charge of creating instructional and training materials. Now, the term itself can be used in a lot of different ways. So the part that Paul was talking about, his focus is on performance-based instructional design. You also have instructional designers who are focused on compliance. There's laws, there's rules, there's regulations, and there's training that has to happen every single year in an organization in order to be compliant. So kind of in short, the instructional designer is responsible for creating instructional and training materials. Linking that a bit to HR, human resources, and I know some folks on the call are human resources. I kind of think about instructional designers and human resources as long lost cousins, right? The HR function is responsible for the recruitment and retention, the talent development. But once that employee is onboarded into your company, instructional designers are the ones who are charged, in many cases, with helping those employees to actually thrive and contribute to the organization. So I think one of the most common scenarios is for an instructional designer to really focus on the employees within an organization, seeing what skills and competencies that they're lacking, and making sure that they can develop training so that those employees can fill those gaps to contribute to the organization's success.
Great, thanks. So I want to ask a question to the audience. In your organization, who's in charge of learning and development? Is it HR or you have an L&D? You can type on chat. If it's HR, type HR that is in charge. If it's L&D, type L&D. And I think nice to mention that HR and learning and development are long lost cousins. At least now I know the relationship, because I think in Kenya we have everybody's bundled in HR. So whether you're in learning and development, you are basically in HR. Okay, so seeing a lot of HR. Syria, yes, yes. LD is in HR docket, but who's actually in charge of what are the learning needs? Who comes up with that? So I'm seeing a lot of, okay, maybe the question would be, does the organization have a learning and development function, clear cut, or it's bundled within HR? It might be in the HR department, but it's clear that if it's learning and development, we have a person in charge of learning and development. Okay, so Rachel, I'd like to ask you, what do you think would make a good learning and development practitioner or trainer? I want to avoid the word trainer, but let's use L&D professional.
All right. Thanks, Martin. And also just building on the discussion we just had on where to place learning and development. And Len's mentioned their cousins, HR and L&D. But I keep thinking, or my experience has been to the disadvantage of L&D, because when you talk about L&D as a function, it's much broader, because it's in comes in instructional design, in comes in training, in comes in learning design, which is an extra for instructional design, because you're talking about bringing in the learner here. What are the learning preferences? Why are we even doing training? Because remember Paul said maybe the solution will be training per se. So that's why the learning and development comes in here. So the learning and development, let's talk as for the individual and also for the function, because it would be good to differentiate those. So for the person or the warm body doing that job, of course, experience would come in handy, and especially for the region. I don't know about for Paul and Lens. For the region, it's not a discipline that has been there for a long time. So it's something that is growing as we speak, and it's something that people grow into. You won't come out of college and become a trainer, or and especially a learning and development practitioner, because this is something you pick on the job, or you stray off from whatever you learned in college, or something that you've been doing for a long time. Case example is myself. I didn't come out of college and became a learning specialist, but it's something I grew on the job and something I liked doing. You could maybe veer off from M&E, from the program side, or also maybe from the project management side, to see what are people doing, how are people learning, and then you go now to design the schools that will train you how to develop these learning solutions. When it comes to the function itself, let's speak of it under HR. Under HR, most of the time it's bundled under staff development. You take a course here, you take a training here. If a line manager has an issue with you, they'll take you, go do this course and do a banded solution. But when you look at the function itself, we are looking at something that is set up to act as a business partner to other functions of the organizations. These are people who will advise on the learning assessments, like the organization-wide. What do we need to learn as an organization? Then bring it back to each staff. What are the competencies we are looking at that will meet our organizational vision? Because there's no need of having these siloed trainings, 100 trainings happening in a year, but they don't speak to what the organization or the company is looking towards achieving. For example, if, a random example, if a company want to achieve, developing or distributing whatever globally, but you are doing trainings on something that doesn't speak to that. So each person will, yes, that's why we saw there is, from the poll, people saying, yes, you're doing trainings and half of it you don't understand. So a function that just has everything as a solution is training, and that does not speak to the organization itself or where the organization vision is going, then that's not a good L&D function. An L&D function that speaks with all the other functions, because it's like the glue that says, we want to go to X, these are the skills we need. Do we need to upskill? Do we need to train? Do we need to job shadow? Do we need to use the other learning ecosystem available in the organization? And then looking at that, you look at, again, when you talk about training, it's just the 10% that affects the learning, or that is part of the 100%. So if you focus so much on the trainings bit as a function, again, we lose the 90% that, again, that you can speak about later in when it comes to how people learn and the learning preferences that come with that. Back to you, Martin.
Thank you, Rachel. A question to the audience. How many in here are in training and they found themselves in training? If you were asked, they hadn't set out to get into training, but one thing led to another, and today you are in training. Maybe we can type a 1 if you found yourself you are in training and you found yourself in training, and you can't even tell how you ended up there. You still question yourself, how did I get here? You can type the response on chat, maybe one, two, and then we'll know that's you. You're what we call an accidental trainer. Okay, good. If you found yourself in training, things happened, and you found yourself, you have a love of training people, teaching people, and I know you are here. I have seen Daktari is here. There, I've seen Kate. You know, okay. As we wait for people to okay, discovered the passion while collecting debts, and then that's an interesting one. Okay, someone trained as a teacher before I took an HR, right? Diana. Okay, uh, discovered a secret, a hidden talent. Great. So now let's get to the main objective of this session. And just before we do that, I'd like to launch a poll. Let's see something that will help us in the next discussion. So does this sound like your organization? We have a competency framework and our learning programs or training we send learners to address the competency gaps. Yeah, let's have more people voting. We'll only open this for 1 minute. Let's see, why do we do trainings in the first place? So interesting, training is training. Okay. Another 20 seconds. Kindly vote if you have not voted, taken part in the poll. And would like to welcome everyone. We have 70 professionals from various countries today on this session. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining at this time. We moved this session to 5 to at least run a godly hour for Paul and Lens. And guys, we also want to thank you for being part of this. Now, I'd like to close this and then let's see. And then I will want to ask Lens, what do you do to design training, learning that has a high on-job transfer of skills?
Sure. There's really three levels to look at, and the framework that you have to have is looking at three different levels. The first level is the individual or worker level. So that's the actual person who's doing the job. And the way I think about competencies is it's the actual task that we want them to do. So what knowledge, what skills, and what abilities are related to the competency. So the first level is the individual or worker level. After that, you want to look at the workplace level. So that's at that's the teams level. So that's with middle management. Then you want to look at the organizational level. So that includes the individual, middle management, and senior leadership. And so you have to make sure that when you're creating training, that those three levels are connected: the worker, the workplace, the organization, and that should go out into the actual world. So those things have to be connected so that you can ensure that the skills and the competencies that you're building at the worker level is going to roll up to benefit the team. And then those same skills that you're building at the team level, so making teams function more effectively together, forming, storming, and norming the teams, project management, making sure that that's functioning well, that should roll up to the organizational senior leadership level. And that's going to roll up to the business objectives. That's going to roll up to the mission and the vision of the organization. So if those things are not aligned between those different levels, then it's very likely that your training is not going to be very measurable, and you're not going to be able to demonstrate ROI, and you're not going to have the impact that you're looking for.
Perfect. Thanks, Lance. Paul, you could share with us, how do you design learning solutions that actually have a high on-job transfer of the skills being shot?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I believe data is human. You know, one thing I find is, sometimes we have this ask, hey, we need training, right? But then, you kind of find that the ask and the reason why you're being asked our training is because some manager has this anecdotal kind of approach, or this kind of hearsay kind of mentality where, maybe he or she has received all this input from other employees that, hey, so when I come into that scenario as an instructional designer and also as a performance consultant, one of the first things I'm asking is, where is the data? Where is the metrics? What have you measured that tells you you have this problem? Because if you follow the data, you're going to find where your problems lie. Those KPIs, those key performance indicators do not lie. And so I come from a very data-driven kind of centric need for, making sure that your training is predicated, upon those right metrics. And once you have figured out, okay, yeah, we do have a problem because the last quarter we had all these numbers of HR managers reporting A, B, C, D, and those are measurable, they're observable, they're provable. This is verifiable evidence which you can present in, in any kind of situation to any executive or anybody else out there and say, this is the case we're making. So for me, I believe, you have to show me the figures. You have to show me those key performance indicators that are, become that catalyst or that impetus for us to develop the training. Then from there, we can say, okay, well, fine, this is not a hearsay kind of a training need. This is verifiable. We have the proof. I can now move forward with methodologies and, kind of start laying down that groundwork as to what kind of training and what kind of modalities and all that good stuff I will implement. But for me, I think having that foundational piece before you have any kind of discussion is really, really important. And, kind of goes back to that root cause analysis. What is it? How does it look like? What are those numbers? And that's my thinking around that space right there.
Thank you, Paul. Rachel, so I've been looking at learning objectives from various training organizations, and I know you have also. You must have taken a look at that. What's the relationship between the learning objectives and actually what we end up as a learning solution? If we have properly informed learning solutions, can we have a training that will actually transfer skills to the employees?
Thanks, Martin. Yes, and no. Let me start with the no first. If you have learning objectives that are quite opposite of what the challenges that you are that are coming out. For example, so as I think Paul mentioned, someone comes in and tells you, we want this training done. And then you as a designer or a trainer, let's use a trainer for ease of reference, you go ahead and develop something. Maybe it's something off the shelf or something you've been doing for a long time and say, you know what, let me just swing it or let me just wing it. That will not achieve the objective that you're looking for because one, you didn't look at your learners, their understanding levels. When I say understanding levels, where are they coming from and what is this that you want to train them on? So maybe doing one thing and they'll come in and just tick the box and go back and have nothing to do with that again. When we look at the yes, when you look at learning objectives that meet the transfer, this is when the skills that you're training them and the training that you actually deliver or design and deliver, you will be looking at what skills do you want your learners to achieve? What attitudes are you looking for them to change? What knowledge are you giving them? And experiences. What experience do you want them to have during the event itself, if it's a training event or a learning event, or even after? For example, let's look at something like attitudes. When you have organizations asking us to develop mandatory courses, this could be like compliance courses, frauds, policies that they have to do. We are looking at the objective of having learners or the staff of this organization at this point change their attitude to the fact that this is what the organization believes in. If it's a standard operating, minimum operating standards, and this is you either take it or you don't. So that comes with the attitude again, the skills. They have to maybe learn a new skill in terms of how interpersonal skills. If it's a compliance course, if it's a fraud course, they have to learn how to detect these attitudes. Again, they have to change that. When you look at knowledge again, are we teaching them something new, or are we teaching them something they already know, but we just want to, top up? We want to upskill them. When it comes to experiences, again, what experience are we giving them? And this comes in now in the delivery itself. In terms of access, how accessible is the course itself? Inclusion, are we putting everyone in mind? When it comes to the structural bit, how are we designing this course when we talk about methodology again? So as a learning practitioner, all this you have to put in mind again, looking at the learning preferences. For example, we are all here, about 72 of us. Some of us prefer to watch a video, some of us prefer to read a book, some of us prefer to go to a class that we are taught. So how do we put all 72 of us and give us, a 30 minutes video to watch and come back and say, we are good to go. What have you learned? Or maybe we don't even have that space or time to be asked what you have learned. So again, looking at the learning objective and what you are trying, what the challenge you're trying to solve should give you a good learning solution. And it comes to, again, to the transfer. So look at the skills. What are you trying to change or for this person? Are you going to give them new skills? Are you going to just upgrade what they have? Do you want to change their attitude from believing on one thing to start believing on something else? Are you going to give them to change their experiences going forward? Because once I learned something, anything else I experience going forward should have a positive or negative effect on me. And again, we bring in the knowledge. So using the 4 areas on what do you want your learner to achieve, and using that to see, is this going to solve the challenges I'm seeing that's coming out? Either I did a needs assessment, or the organization itself is looking at trying to solve that when it comes to the courses that actually are now run inside the organization. But when you look at voluntary courses, I go out there, I want to learn how to, report writing, public speaking, and that again. So that's being voluntary. It will depend, is it speaking to my needs as an individual? All right. So again, having to see, if you're looking for voluntary courses, what are you looking at to solve at an individual level? But also, does it speak to the organization you're working at? Because I could be out here, I'm in finance, I'm a finance officer, and I'm out there doing public speaking courses. Does that speak to my day-to-day job? Again, so, and then that's where the learning unit comes in, to speak to and say, what are you looking for, and how does this speak to the job you're working at now, but also your career progression, because you could be building up to something 5 years to come or 10 years to come. So again, not just stopping and saying you're not supposed to do this course, but what else can you do if you are working at becoming a finance manager, a CEO, or how can we build that journey going forward so that whatever you're learning now speaks to the journey that you're looking at. Yeah, back to you, Martin.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. So I think I'd like to address this to Lens and Paul. So, and in the audience, if the scenario I'm creating does not relate to what we're doing, you can say, Martin, that's not true. And I look at it from the perspective of trainers, both perspectives, trainers and purchasers of training. I'm a trainer, I get an assignment, we need a training next week, Friday. And the training is on customer care. So Martin, come prepared to deliver training on customer care next week, Friday. So Lens, as a trainer, if I sit down and develop that training, and something wrong I've done.
I didn't catch that last part there. Mm-hmm.
So client comes, tells me, Martin, our team needs customer service training. Next week, Friday, come and prepare to deliver customer training, customer service training. And I just get off into putting together a training on customer service, and how difficult can it be? It's customer service. So am I doing it right, or there's some gaps in that?
Great question. So to answer that question, we as training professionals, you have to think about where you are in the organization, right? So in the organizational hierarchy, if your boss or your supervisor or somebody who is at a higher ranking asks you for something, uh, you have to be very political in the way in which you say no, right? Or let's think about this in another way. One of the ways I like to kind of answer that question is say, yes, I can create customer service training for you. I can have it ready for you by next week, but that might not solve the problem that you're trying to solve. So, can you tell me why you'd like to have this customer service training created? And one of the techniques that you can use, it's called the 5 whys. So this is going back to what Paul had mentioned a short while ago, finding the root cause. You're trying to find out why somebody has decided to come to you for training in the first place. So rather than saying something to the effect of, no, why do you want me to create this training in a week's worth of time? It's a waste of time. That's not really the way that you should approach it from a political standpoint. But if you're able to kind of flip the question and say, I can do that for you, it might not solve your problem, but let's explore together what it is that you're trying to do. The conversation can flow much better. Now, organizationally, politically, you still might have to create the training. Some people they can be stubborn. They just want training. They want it next week. You're either going to create the training or you're going to be in some difficult situation. So there's a fine line between getting that job done, doing your job, and not being subordinate, versus really working to be a partner with your boss. And so that's the line that we have to balance as learning professionals.
Thank you, Lance. So, Paul, maybe I'd like you. I was reading somewhere 10%, which is the learning, is a classroom or e-learning, is only 10%, is about 10%, and the 90% is in informal learning. Should we think deeply around incorporating informal learning into our e-learning or virtual instructor-led learning programs to enable transfer of skills?
Yeah, I think learning happens everywhere, every day, every kind of interaction that you got out there. Now, there's no empirical methodology to capture all these different avenues where all this learning is happening out there. Now, when I think about companies like Qualtrics, these guys have a multi kind of a feedback tool where they use that to capture all different kind of avenues where people are learning, and that's kind of aggregated into a system where they can say, oh, okay, training is, learning and training and knowledge infusion is happening in different kind of quotients. And some companies have such tools, but not every company can afford the luxury of that. Now, however, I think there is verifiable evidence that uh, training, again, kind of go back to what we're saying here, that training is not the solution. You're going to be surprised how many companies have really good training, which some employees do not choose. It's kind of interesting, using one of the methodologies we use to measure business impact and business objectives. There's a methodology known as the success case method. I think methodology or method or something like that. And this was developed by a researcher named Robert Brinkerhoff. And his logic and his thinking is that, look, some people get training and they use that training on the job. And also on that side of that spectrum, there are others who get training but leave value on the table. So his thinking is around, why are these people leaving training here? Why are they not choosing it? What is the obstacle to that application on the job, that, you know, that kind of transfer right there? And so his methodology is thinking about why we have Mr. X and Mr. Y or Mrs. Y, and why they, you know, do a A-B comparison, why these two do not transfer that value back, which of course at the end of the day impacts that business objective right there. So the different channels, you know, I think all this should be considered. You know, we do have tools which are helping us aggregate how people learn, whether it's social, whether it's solitary, whether it's using LXPs. And LXP is a learning experience platform, which right now it's kind of trendy because traditionally we have an LMS, which is your typical admin who controls, uh, you know, who gets what courses out there. But a learning experience platform is more socialized. You know, you think about YouTube, you think about Facebook, think about all the people who go to socialize about, hey, things going on out there. So some companies have introduced these hybrid LMSs, which we're calling LXPs, which tracks everywhere an employee goes as far as clickable links are concerned and what kind of training they're doing out there. And this is reported back to that LXP, and that kind of becomes your trackable slash LMS right there. So you're right, Martin. The different ways people learn, and there's some truth to that kind of adage right there.
Thank you, Paul. So I want to come to you, Lens. I still remember you jumping into a meeting in the next 10 minutes. Do you think, maybe before that, maybe I could ask a question. How many people are in training and have heard the term instructional design? If you're in training or learning and development and you've heard the term instructional design, type a yes. If it's the first time you're hearing it or don't even know what it is, type a no. I think it's a mix with a number of people having had it. Okay, Julie, the question is, if you have heard the term or know of the term instruction design, a yes, say you have heard about it. No, it's the first time you're possibly hearing about it. So, Lance, my question to you. I know most people in this market have received TOT, training of trainers, and then they set off to training. Is that enough to design learning that creates transferable skills?
The train the trainer. So just to back up a second, the train to trainer is usually the very last part of where instructional designers are involved. So the first part that we've been talking about, it really keys in on analysis. So analyzing the training need, if whatever the problem is actually requires training, if it's determined that yes, the problem that the organization has identified requires training, then we can move on to designing and developing that training. Now, once that training is designed and it's developed, we have to have some type of handoff because instructional designers, we design the instruction, but we don't necessarily stand and deliver the training. So while some people might do both, fulfill both roles, in my experience, it's usually the case that the instructional designers will create the training and then trainers will deliver the training. So that the handoff, the transitions piece there is the train the trainer. So this is where an instructional designer will work with the trainer to really be sure that they're clear about how the training has been developed, how it should be delivered. In some cases, the trainer will also work with the instructional designer to create it. So just to say that these roles they're fluid. They're very fluid at times. But the trainer is really to be sure that the trainer themselves is knowledgeable about how they should be delivering the training. Now, I don't know if that hit on all of your question, Martin, but let me know
I have a
if you need
follow-up
more.
question. Question
Mhm.
is, what would be the likely case scenario where you have someone who's done a training of trainers actually now coming to develop a training or design it, develop, because most of the times you start from develop. What would be the repercussions in that, if there is any?
If somebody,
Someone with that knowledge around having undertaken a training of trainer, a TOT, a trainer of trainers, but
Mhm.
then now after that they move on to start creating learning programs or learning solutions.
Sure, sure. So, if I'm hearing you correctly, this actually happens um, more often than I think instructional designers would want to admit. So, the train the trainer happens, right? So, the instructional designer, we sit down with the trainer, we tell them this is how the training is supposed to go. Everybody's on board, everybody's in agreement. Senior leadership is in agreement, the president of the company is in agreement. And then the trainer goes to deliver the training and they do something completely different. So you can imagine that politically, this becomes very challenging as well. I've had situations where I've sat in on trainings that I've developed, and the trainer will, they pull out their own materials, they pull out their own case studies, they pull out their own examples, and essentially, they can start to shift the training towards what they might want it to be. And so, as a learning professional, you have to be sure that you have all the pieces in place from your organization to be sure that the trainer knows what they can and can't do. Now, there should be some flexibility. There's no need to be so rigid, so that the trainer doesn't have the flexibility to add their own flavor to their teaching. But at the same time, they have to operate within a certain framework to be sure that they're not just kind of going off on their own and doing what they want to do.
Perfect. So just to find the final question, Lance, I know you can drop off at any point after this question. Is
Sure.
instructional design a usable skill and a relevant skill for anybody in learning and development?
It's just as I was reading the chat function, I would say yes. And for those of you who are in HR, maybe you don't have the title or the term instructional designer, maybe HR and learning and development are bundled together. I actually think you have an opportunity there, because you get to see the employee experience from start to finish, right? From HR, you're onboarding the employee. Onboarding is just another way of saying training, right? You're getting them trained up on the organization. Um, and you get to see how they perform within the organization up until either they leave or they get fired. So the main point is that if your resources are bundled, I think that the instructional design expertise is very helpful, because you can really see the employee experience from start to finish. So I think just a way of thinking, right? The analysis, the problem solving aspect of the field is very transferable, whether your title is instructional designer or not.
Okay, thanks, Les. You have our permission. You can drop off wherever you want to for the next meeting. At least I'll still have Paul and Rachel. We have just a few minutes up as we're winding. To the audience, you can type up your question on chat, and then we'll be able to respond to them. So, Paul, what the years you've been in training, what is the one key thing you've learned?
Um, that's a good question, yo. And sorry to pull this on you, because Lance is also leaving. I also have to leave in the next 5 minutes
No
for
problem. We'll be
another
winding
hard
up in the
stop.
next 5.
Yeah. But to answer your question right there, I think one of the things which I really enjoyed and still enjoy as an instructional designer is I think it's a three-legged stool here. You know, the first aspect is performance consultancy, asking questions. Why do we need training? What's that root cause analysis? Wearing that kind of journalistic hat and going out there to look for those answers. I think the second kind of leg here in this instructional design discipline is having that technical acumen. You know, you're bringing all this software whiz know-how into what you're building. You know, you become the determiner of what kind of modality and formats are going to be used. Are you going to do a VR? Are you going to do an AR? Are you going to do an infographic? You have all these rich infusion at your disposal, right? And then the third aspect of this flag, which I'm calling the three-legged stool, is you become a business impact evaluator. You can go back and measure using different methodologies. How effective was this training? What is a return on training investment, right? And all these three disciplines make an instructional designer. So if you're operating on just one side of this stool, start thinking about how can you encapsulate, how can you encompass all these different disciplines and make yourself even more formidable in this industry.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Rachel, what have you learned while learning in L&D?
Of course, I've learned a lot, but also I think the joy I have from what I've learned is to see the impact learning and development can have on organizations. I've seen someone asking, how do you measure impact? How do you measure against KPIs? Again, it's a discussion that once you have and once you understand why you're having that learning, you get to understand the matrices. But also, I think for me, I always tie it up to a conversation I had one time when we were trying to fight for budgets for training, when the leadership asked us, what if we train them and they leave? And the question we asked back is, what if we don't train them and they stay? So having the joy to see and experience when organizations actually invest in learning and development, not just training, because when you talk about training, most times people think it's a one-off event, you know, think events that you can count 100 trainings for the year, 200 trainings, but really when does learning happen? A good question to ask. And what are we achieving when we say we're actually learning as an organization, but bringing it back again to the staff. So in terms of when you are tasked as a HR or as a learning person to justify the numbers, all right? When someone comes and says, this person is in discipline, I think they can do a training on fraud, or they can do a training on competencies or compliances. What will you say? I think Martin had asked that question. When someone comes in and says, let's do this training, or this person, they can be solved by training. Having the knowledge to sit that person down and say, that is not the answer, but you can have other answers. And also seeing how much you can leverage on the ecosystem in the organizations. And when I talk about the ecosystem, is what else aids learning in the organization. You had mentioned the 10%, and which is part of the 70-20-10 approach. Training is just 10%, and we focus so much on that. And then we leave the 20%, which is social learning, peer learning. How do people learn best? I mean, when I want to learn something, where do I first go to? Maybe to my friends, maybe to the coffee place, and then I learn something there. And then the 70% experiential learning, job aids, shadowing, and stuff like that. But you focus so much on the 10% that by the time I'm taking someone for training, maybe they're on their way out from their company. But how can you ensure that this is all it encompasses the life cycle of the staff at the organization, but also not forgetting to link it with the organization goals. Otherwise, we will just be running against the wind, and training will never meet the needs. As remember the polls you had asked, we'll always have trainings for the sake of training, or we are just sending people for training, but because it's a 5-day out of office, people are willing to go. But how can we bring it back to where they are? There was a study that was done that people look at their phones 150 times a day when they're in the office. So how can we bring it back to them to learn on the job, learn on their phones, because that's where they spend most of their time on. And again, using the platform that we have now. There's so many LXP, LMSs. Getting that data to inform us, where are people going for learning? Are they going on YouTube? Can we incorporate that in our learning and in the initiatives we bring? So not just developing trainings, but developing learning solutions that speak to the challenges that companies are going through.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. Paul, maybe final question.
Yes.
How relevant is gaming or games to learning? And in reference to skill transfer?
So gaming, right?
Yes.
Well, I think gaming has its uses, and when I think about, you know, we kind of think of what kind of classification or what kind of need are you trying to solve, you know? So games, for me, you never want to use them haphazardly because the need of the audience and the nature of the activity has to be the determiner as to why you should be using gaming. But say you use gaming as your modality, yeah, and you have, you know, that kind of justification as to why you're using it, you know. The one advantage of using gaming is it has absolutely immersive appeal to it. And if you couple this with AR and VR as your modality, you know, in the delivery of this, then what you have pretty much done is you have reduced the speed to proficiency almost 100% fold right there. So with emerging technologies, we as instructional designers are faced with, you know, outside our kind of box tools and how we can kind of incorporate that into what we deliver out there as a solution. We are forced to start thinking about how best can I use different modalities? How best can I engage and immerse? Now, if gaming happens to be the format that you need to use, and you have not been using it because you do not have the skills or have no idea how you can even make that happen, then that's something that you need to start looking to, you know, either have like a stopgap way to bridge the gap. It could either be, doing some classes on LinkedIn Learning, or kind of partnering with vendors who have this capability. But gaming has been proven to be absolutely immersive, and now with AR and VR, I mean, the sky's the limit right now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paul. So we have about 6 questions. I know we might not be able to respond to all of them. So in our emailer today, we'll have responses to this question. This session will be sent to you by the end of the day today. But just to respond to one question, and maybe if you have time, Paul, you can check on the list of 5. Rachel, you can check on the list of 5. I'd like to respond to Liz on how do we link training with HR KPIs. Now, I'd say this, Liz. We can have operational or strategic HR KPIs. If the strategic is raising competencies, then it is not the number of trainings attended, but the competencies built. So not focusing on the number of trainings someone has gone to or the employees have attended, but rather what skills what competencies have we breached? So let's look at the general larger KPIs, the strategic or the initiatives KPI, and not to have operational of checkbox. We need to send people to 10 trainings. So we send people to 10 trainings, but we don't even know. Maybe that's the half we don't know if that works. So let's link to strategic objective KPI and initiatives KPI, which form part of the HR KPIs. Paul, you've seen a question you'd like to answer, or Rachel, out of the 5?
Okay, I can go. So you've tackled the one for KPIs quite well, but just to add on, I think it's important to have the KPIs, but again, link them up not just for HR, but because if you just link them up for HR, then the training won't speak to people that are not part of HR. And again, link them up to the organization strategy, the vision, and the mission. That way, it will be very easy to walk back from to individual KPIs. And then, what elements should a good online training for employees include? I think again, what is the aim of the training, and especially for a good online training, because you're looking at either a self-paced training where I go in, do a course for an hour, or a virtual-led, instructor-led, where I go in, I'm with my instructor for an hour, maybe a session like this. But also, when you look at developing good online training, you have to look at accessibility, and we have experience, especially in this part of the world, internet connections. You have to look how heavy is your course, that I can access it with very little bundles, or do I have to, can I download it, put it in a flash disk, and then go and do it offline? But also, when you look at designing it in such a way, having the adult learning principles in mind. Most adults can focus for about 10 minutes, and then after that they veer off or they get distracted. So maybe 10 minutes of proper focusing, and then 2 minutes of either a breakout, an activity or something like that. The same way Martin was doing, keeping us engaged with the polls and stuff. So having that active listening mind in place. And also you can use different ways of learning when you're doing online. You can use the visual, which maybe a PowerPoint, and also a video, hearing as well using video. But also there's one we called kinesthetic. I don't know if I can pronounce it well. The feeling bit, okay? Because we want to touch the mind, we want to touch the heart, and we want to touch the hands, the doing bit. What do I need to do differently after this training? And this covers also whether it's face-to-face or online training. So by touching the mind, the feeling bit will change my behavior. All right. When it touches my heart, my attitude will change, because I can change my behavior if I do a fraud course, I won't steal anymore. But does my attitude towards fraud change? All right. So I want to touch my mind, my heart, and also my hands, that I will do things differently. And then what are the challenges of leadership development programs? Again, the KPIs, not having the right objectives on why you're doing them, and also the measuring bit, because if you're doing them for a cohort, let's say 20 people in an organization, are you sure they're going to stay, or will your work be just training them and after a few years they leave, you have to train them again? But can you design a program that there's a transfer of knowledge back to them, that they're accountable? If they've gone through a training program, they can, hold hand someone else and transfer those skills or the knowledge that they learned, so that the knowledge stays in the organization even if they leave. I can leave the rest for.
Let me handle number 4 is broad. Let me handle number 5. What are the most important things the KPI should measure in training? I think here we are mixing two things. In learning, what we should be measuring is the outcome of the learning, how well the learning objectives were covered. So the KPI would be, how well have we been able to achieve in terms of behavior change, because we either needed a skill imparted onto someone, and we can measure that through Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of evaluation. So, but then if we are looking at the KPI per se as the ones we look at from the scorecard, then I think we might be mixing a few things. The KPI for learning is, how well have we transferred the skill that we wanted? Have we moved someone's competency from a 1 or 2 to a higher level, to a 3/4? Again, we will be sharing more responses on these questions in our emailer for today. Thank you for these questions. There are 5 very broad questions. Number 4, just to touch lightly, goes into the design of into the development of the learning, into the analysis, the design, the development, the implementation, and the evaluation. AD, which is a whole session on its own. So we would like to at least try to cover some more responses on this on our email with this session recording. So I'd like to ask the audience, we're already about 13 minutes over the time. is there any question from the audience that you feel you'd like to have responded to before we close in the next 2 minutes? Maybe you have a question that you think we should ask right now. For everyone asking, we will share the recording of this session within maybe 2 hours of now. Richard, how can one measure informal or self-directed learning? Your learning objectives actually form the measure. And measure, there are 4 levels of measurement: the reaction, the behavior. That's in Kirkpatrick's evaluation models. I know you love reading, Richard. I'd like to point you in that direction. Okay, Clement, Martin, I joined quite late. Kindly send us the recording of this presentation. We will share the presentation in a very short while. Any other questions for everyone? And then one last thing before we leave, we close the session. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate this presentation, this session? On a scale of 1 to 5, kindly give us a rating for this session. Dr. Flora, check your spam emails. Check your spam. If you have not received email from us, check your spam mail. We might be in your junk. And when you find us in your junk, mark us as not spam. Okay, thank you very much for the rating. Kindly, if you have not rated, give us a rating. Genevieve, thank you very much. I wanted to write privately and ask what we did wrong so that we can correct that next time. Second, lastly, before we wind up, we have been receiving query on, can we get a certificate of participation for all the sessions we have done as proof of learning? We would want to do that today, this coming week. So we will be communicating on what it will require. We'll charge a small admin fee of about 400 shillings, and then we'll mail for each session that you have participated. Just to find out from the audience, would be having certificates of participation be a good thing for proof of learning to your various institutes that actually you have been learning? Great. So we will be sharing communication on SMS and email on how we can provide you with the certificates of participation and other details also. For those outside Kenya, we will provide a way to be able to get those certificates. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone. Tomorrow's session is at 11. Today we did at 5 p.m. because of Lens and Paul, so that we have at least have them on a godly hour. So we'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's session. Join us tomorrow at 11 o'clock where we'll be handling the session of culture. We'll have Anne and an OD and performance consultant from Nigeria. Stephen, whether CPD will be awarded or not, that's particularly to the institute, but we are offering certificate that as proof that you have been learning. So that's the whole idea. We're not saying we're offering them for CPD, we're offering them for proof. So you'll be able to prove to your institute that you've actually been learning. The discussion whether they award CPD or not, I think the key thing is that you're learning. So thank you very much and have a nice, great evening, everyone. And join us tomorrow at 11 o'clock. We will be sharing shortly this recording of this session. So have a great evening and thank you very much.